Okay, hello, good day everyone. So let's continue our discussion dito sa value added tax. So we are now at section 110, which is on tax credits. Okay, so the first tax credit that we can avail as a taxpayer or a business taxpayer is the creditable input tax. Right, so na try nyo namang nag-compute nito, right? You already know the effect of creditable input tax. So, a creditable input tax, any input tax evidenced by a VAT invoice or official receipt issued in accordance with Section 113 hereof on the following transactions shall be creditable against the output tax. Okay? So, uh, the creditable input tax, kailangan natin ng evidence. So, specifically, yung VAT invoice or yung official receipt ng mga pinurchase natin. At syempre, hindi naman tayo makaka-avail ng mga input tax kung wala naman tayong ebidensya. Right? Kung meron talagang input VAT na inavail tayo or binayaran natin. Right? So, this input VAT, alam naman natin, this is creditable against the output VAT, output tax. So, for example, meron kang dapat babayaran na let's say 50,000 na value added tax. Pero you can also avail input tax. So for example, meron kang input tax na 20,000. So yung 20,000 na input tax na yon, pwede mo i-deduct from your total output VAT para makuha mo yung total value added tax payable mo. So liliit yung tax payable mo kapag mag-avail ka ng input tax. So, here are the following transactions na pwede mong i-avail yung input tax. You have your purchase or importation of goods, so for sale. So, kung bumili ka ng mga ibebenta mo, ng mga inventory mo. Kung yung mga binili mo is merong VAT o value added tax na binayaran ka, you can avail that as an input VAT. For conversion into or intended to form part of a finished product, for sale including packaging materials. Okay, so kung may binili ka na magpo-form part, okay, or i-convert mo as your finished product na ibebenta. Right? For example, mga kahoy. Kung bumili ka ng kahoy at yung mga kahoy na yon is may binayaran kang value added tax, you can avail that value added tax as long as yung ginamit mong kahoy is yung kahoy na binili mo is ginamit mo as part of your finished product for use as supplies in the course of business. Okay, so kung mga supplies na binibili natin kung may value added tax, for use as materials supplied in the sale of services, so los pares lang naman, materials supplied, for use in trade or business for which deduction for depreciation or amortization is allowed under this code. Okay, so yun yung mga purchase or importation of goods. Okay, so take note on the word goods. You can also avail tax on the purchase of services on which a value added tax has actually been paid. Okay, so kung may mga services tayo na in-avail, right, for example, meron tayong repair services, na nagpa-repair tayo, tapos basta merong sa invoice, kung yung invoice meron tayong nakitang value added tax na binayaran tayo, then we can also avail that as input VAT, input tax. Okay, so the input tax on domestic purchase or importation of goods or properties by a value added tax registered person shall be creditable to the purchaser upon consumption of sale and on importation of goods or properties, and to the importer upon payment of the value added tax prior to the release of the goods from the custody of the Bureau of Customs. Okay, so this part here talks about on when we can avail or when we will be credited yung input tax. So if we are a purchaser, okay, kapag purchaser tayo, right, tayo ay domestic purchase, bumibili lang tayo dito sa loob ng Pilipinas, we can input tax is creditable upon consumption of sale. So kapag nagbenta na tayo, saka lang tayo pwede makaka-avail ng creditable input tax. and importation of goods or properties. Kapag importer naman tayo, okay, upon payment of the value-added tax prior to the release of the goods. So, di ba, kapag importer tayo, unang mapupunta muna siya sa Bureau of Customs. Okay? Tapos, saka lang ito mare-release kapag magbabayad na tayo ng value-added tax. So, upon payment, before man tayo magbayad, pwede na tayong mag-avail ng input tax para mas maliit na yung bayaran natin sa Bureau of Customs. Right? Kasi take note, kapag importer tayo, bumibili tayo from outside the Philippines. So, this is iba siya compared sa domestic purchaser na instead sa domestic purchaser saka lang siya magbabayad ng value added tax upon selling, right? Upon selling. Pero yung importer before pa lang niya makukuha yung goods niya, kailangan na niya magbayad ng value added tax, right? So, pwede natin mag-credit yung input tax upon payment of the value-added tax. Sabi nila, provided that the input tax on goods purchased or imported in a calendar month for use in trade or business, for which the deduction for depreciation is allowed under this code, shall be spread evenly over the month of acquisition. Okay, and 59 succeeding months if the aggregate acquisition cost per excluding VAT component thereof exceeds 1 million. Okay, so sabi lang dito, kapag kapag yung binayaran nating yung inavail nating input tax, it shall be spread evenly over the month of acquisition. So kung bumili tayo for the month of January tapos nag-avail tayo ng input tax, yung inavail nating input tax dapat ma-divide siya for the days of for the month of January. Right, so kung naman kapag nag-exceed ng 1 million yung cost of purchase natin, then 59 months naman, 15 succeeding months, 60 months pala. Total of 60 months yung i-spread natin yung input tax. Okay? So sabi dito, if the estimated useful life of the capital good is less than 5 years as used for depreciation purposes. Okay, so let's just skip that. Hindi nyo kailangan malaman yung depreciation kasi yan eh. So number 3, a VAT registered person who is also engaged in transactions not subject to the value added tax shall be allowed tax credit as follows. Total input tax which can be directly attributed to the transaction subject to value added tax. A rateable portion of any input tax which cannot be directly attributed to either activity. Okay, so sabi lang, so on number 3, this is a VAT registered person na may more than one transaction or more than one service and yung mga sales. So kapag ang isang taxpayer is may more than one business or more than one service, yung isa is subject to value added tax, tapos yung isa is not subject to value added tax. Okay, we can allocate the input tax, total input tax which can be directly attributed to the transaction subject to the value added tax. So kung meron man tayong input tax na directly attributed talaga sa transaction na subject sa VAT, value added tax, then we can claim that full total input tax, right? So for example, let's say na meron tayong isang taxpayer. Okay? Meron siyang dalawang services. Yung isang service niya is subject sa value added tax. While yung isang service naman niya is subject lang siya sa percentage tax. So wala siyang binabayarang value added tax sa isang service niya. Tapos siya ay he purchased materials na gagamitin niya sa service niya na subject sa value added tax, right? So yung purchase of materials, kapag subject siya sa value added tax, pwede siyang mag-avail ng input tax doon. yung total input tax kasi yung binili niyang materials is directly attributable to the service na subject sa value added tax. Hindi naman niya ginagamit yung materials na yon para sa isang service niya, right, na hindi subject sa value added tax. So in that case, total input tax ang pwede niyang i-avail. Pero kung meron siyang input tax na hindi attributable sa either activity. So for example, meron lang siyang nag-avail lang siya ng services na ginagamit niya for both of the nag-avail siya ng let's just say na bumili siya ng goods. Bumili siya ng goods na ginagamit niya para sa dalawang services niya. Right? So in that case, dahil attributable siya sa dalawang services niya, isa sa value added tax at isa sa percentage tax, kailangan nating i-rate or kailangan natin siyang i-ratio in the proportion of the input tax. Okay? So for example, yung sales niya under sa services na subject sa value added tax is 50,000. Tapos yung sales niya under sa services na subject sa percentage tax is 50,000 din. Then yung input tax, pwede natin siyang i-proportion 50-50 kasi pareha sila ng sales, right? So ganun lang 'yon. Okay, so let's go with letter B. Excess output or input tax. So if at the end of any taxable quarter, the output tax exceeds the input tax, the excess shall be paid by the VAT registered person. If the input tax exceeds output tax, the excess shall be carried over to the succeeding quarter or quarters, provided, however, that any input tax attributable to zero-rated sales by a VAT registered person may, at his option, may be refunded or credited against other internal revenue taxes subject to the provisions of Section 112. Okay, so this just kapag mas malaki yung output tax natin kaysa sa input tax, syempre yung for example, let's just give an example. For example, meron tayong 60,000 na output VAT, tapos meron tayong 50,000 na input VAT. So dahil mas malaki yung output VAT natin, syempre ide-deduct natin siya sa input tax. So 60,000 less 50,000, 10,000 ang VAT payable natin. So babayaran natin yung 10,000 na yon. Pero kung mas malaki naman yung input tax natin compared sa output tax, then that shall be carried over to the succeeding quarter or quarters. Right? So for example, 60,000 ulit yung output VAT natin, tapos 70,000 naman yung input VAT natin. So in that case, mas malaki na yung input VAT kaysa sa output VAT natin. So dahil mas malaki yung input VAT, wala tayong babayaran. Tapos may excess pa tayong 10,000 na input VAT. So yung 10,000 na yun na input VAT na excess natin, pwede natin siyang i-carry over sa next quarter. So pwede natin ulit i-avail siya as input tax or input VAT on the next quarter. Okay? So for those taxpayers who are subject to zero-rated sales, okay, so remember yung zero-rated sales, these are 0% yung value yung output VAT nila, pero pwede pa rin silang mag-avail ng input tax. So in that case, dahil zero nga yung output VAT nila, yung input tax na binayaran nila, they can either be credited against other taxes, or they can be refunded, right? So for example, meron tayong isang taxpayer na subject sa 0% zero-rated sales. Tapos meron siyang binayarang 50,000 na input VAT. So yung 50,000 na yon, pwede niyang i-refund sa BIR or pwede niyang i-credit sa other taxes niya. So kung meron man siyang income tax, right, pwede niyang i-deduct yung input tax na yon sa income tax niya para matanggalan yung income tax. Pero hindi lang yun limited sa income tax. Pwede niyang i-credit yon sa any other type of taxes. So kung meron man siyang donor's tax, right, at mga estate tax, mga ganun, pwede niyang i-credit. So, determination of creditable input tax. So, the sum of the excess input tax carried over from the preceding month or quarter and the input tax creditable to a VAT registered person during the taxable month or quarter shall be reduced by the amount of claim for refund or tax credit for value added tax and other adjustments such as uh, purchase returns or allowances and input tax attributable to exempt sales. So the claim for tax credit shall referred to in the foregoing paragraph shall be included not only those filed with the Bureau of Internal Revenue but also those filed with other government agencies such as the Board of Investment and other Bureau of Customs. Okay, so of course kung meron man tayong inavail na mga refund or tax credit, then siyempre matatanggal na yung input tax natin, right? So, for example, meron tayong 50,000 na creditable input tax. Tapos nag-ano tayo, uh, nag-refund tayo ng 30,000. So siyempre 30,000 from that 50,000 shall be deducted as your input tax. Right? So ganun lang 'yon. Okay? So, yun lang muna for today. So, next meeting na natin i-discuss ito. Section 112, right? Ay, section 111 pala. Okay? So, bale, yung for your finals, bale, ito na lang bale, introduction to business tax and this value added tax na lang yung coverage natin. Hindi na natin i-discuss yung percentage tax and other percentage taxes. Okay? So that will be all for today class. Thank you for listening and goodbye.